are happening to that information. So it is editing your file without you having any control over it. The other thing that happens is that a lot of colors and a lot of information gets thrown out the window because of the JPEG compression algorithm that a JPEG file is saved as. So all of these things happen when you save a JPEG file, whether you have your camera set on JPEG setting when you're shooting, or if you just save information in a program like Photoshop. If you save it as a JPEG, it is doing all of these other things as well. So we're trying to finesse and control our edits, and this sacrifices that. It gives away the control to the program and to these algorithms that are doing things without our knowledge. So now all raw, professional photographers shoot in RAW because of this. And that raw information gives you the purest connection to your photograph. Digital cameras have proprietary raw image extensions. So you're not going to see a .RAW, for example. You're going to see a .CR2 most commonly, or a .NEF as well if you're shooting Nikon, a .CR2 if you're shooting Canon. And here's a list of all these other companies that have proprietary raw image formats. And if you're shooting in Sony, it's ARW, etc. So this is something that people get confused. It's thinking, well, where is the .RAW? Well, it's these proprietary companies that are actually naming these extensions themselves, and you're going to be using them if you shoot in RAW on one of their cameras. So looking at the differences between all of these, where does a TIFF come into play? Because we've explained where a RAW file comes from. It comes from the camera. And what are the benefits of shooting in RAW? Well, we already learned that it doesn't compress information, it doesn't get rid of information. Now, the TIFF especially comes after we start editing our raw file. The moment that we start editing a raw file inside of a program like Photoshop or Lightroom, we're going to have to save it out as another type of image file, either a TIFF or a JPEG. We can't save a file out as a raw file. So thinking about that, let's take a look at what the JPEG advantages and disadvantages are. Well, we've already learned that the disadvantages are very high. It loses information during compression and it sacrifices image quality. But the advantages are very important here. We have best for sharing on social media. Those raw files can go, those JPEG files can get loaded onto the internet and be seen and downloaded very quickly. It is the most common image format and it takes up little to no space. We're thinking about the raw file extension. It is the closest to film quality, and we're talking about analog film here. There's no compression at all, and you have so much control when you're post-processing your image. So like a JPEG saves and it sharpens your image. Well, not every image should be sharpened the same way, and so we want control of that. And so shooting in RAW gives you that control. They're also having options where you can now shoot in RAW on smartphones. The other thing for RAW files, just like TIFF, is that it requires a lot of storage space, and there's some software that's not compatible with actually looking at it. So probably your image editing software on your phone or some of these third-party image editing won't be able to see it and some of these just, image viewer softwares, you won't be able to see a raw file. Now TIFF, you cannot shoot in TIFF on a digital SLR, and it's not widely available. There's some models that have this, but they're very expensive models, camera bodies, and even if you have the option, more likely than not, you're going to choose to shoot in RAW because you want to take advantage of raw processing. The other disadvantage of TIFF, as we saw earlier, is that it is going to take up a lot of storage space. Out of all three formats, it's going to take up the most storage space. And you will not be able to put these images on the web. Uploading is going to take a long time. It's going to slow down the entire process. Advantages of TIFF is that it's non-compressing when you save it. It's not doing anything under the hood. It's not changing anything. So that's a real big advantage of saving as a TIFF. It is going to preserve that information as much as possible when you save as a TIFF. And it's supported by all of these other editing programs as well. So let's go back to the files and the folders from the professional photographer's delivery to a client and take a look at exactly how we can apply this to some of the lessons that we learned. So here you can see that the TIFF is taking up the most space, yet this is an uncompressed version of our information, and so we want to preserve this. We want to back it up. So if we wanted to edit these files, we would start at the TIFFs and then save them out. If you edit over a JPEG, for example, even if it's a high resolution JPEG like this, you will save and then throw out, save and then throw out. Every time you save as a JPEG, it does the same interpolation, it does the same compression. So saving more than once as a JPEG doesn't make much sense because it is sacrificing image quality exponentially. So that's why these TIFFs are pure data. And so if I wanted to make multiple versions of a single file, if I wanted to have a black and white version, a color version, I would start at my TIFFs and then save them out as JPEGs. Now we have the web down here, and you can see that these are low-res JPEGs files that are ready to get put on social media, on websites, to be viewed on computer monitors and other screens. So that's something that you want to write down, especially if you have delivery to files to a client. This is the professional way that you're going to be delivering those files. The other thing that is really important is that you name that information. You give that information some purpose, name those files accordingly so that you can actually organize yourself, and the client will be happy because everything is organized and ready to go.